Thanks for tuning into the Urban Scope podcast. I'm back with another NFL topic. Now, I discussed the Miles Garrett's Mount Rushmore at defensive lineman, which I thought was a little offsetting because of the defensive players that are considered linebackers, but we know in true essence they are defensive linemen. Um, and I wanted to do Mount Rushmore of those linebackers who are the best pass rushing linebackers. So excluding those linebackers like a Mike Singletary or Ray Lewis or Luke Kuechly's or any of those linebackers that are pass coverage guys as well. Those this Mount Rushmore is just about the guys who pass rush linebackers who really are lined up on a line of scrimmage most of the time, who are not really in pass coverages and things like that, and that's not their forte or their duality. Because we know linebackers have a duality position where you are supposed to get the quarterback, but you're also supposed to, cover TEs and stuff like that. You're not in a slot receiver sometime and things like that. But those guys that really don't have a duality, their focus and their number one goal in their scheme and their defenses is to get the quarterback. And those guys like in my Mount Rushmore, I'm talking about is like Von Miller, of course, Terrell Suggs, Lawrence Taylor, Derek Thomas. Those guys were listed as linebackers, but their primary focus was sacking the quarterback or disrupting an offense, whether it be stopping the run or stopping the pass. So these guys, I think, are in elite company because Von Miller, of course, coming out of Texas A&M, nobody saw that type of player that he turned out to be in the NFL. He was very agile. He can bend the corner. He can basically lined up parallel to the line of scrimmage, which is very difficult to do, especially for he was undersized, but for a guy that size and for a player that played at that position, it's very difficult to do. And he's one of the most skillful pass rushers I've ever seen, similar to what a DeMarcus Ware, who was on my honorable mention list, was able to do. These were guys that can rush the edge and can jump off the football, very explosive. And that's one of the biggest things about these defensive linemen is how explosive can you be off the football? Because they need to know that you can jump off the football and put pressure on these linemen and these quarterbacks and disrupt the offense. And this is what Von Miller was able to do out his whole career, and he won a Super Bowl MVP off disrupting that Carolina offense who was just flying high. But he was looking, he was pretty much unblocked that whole game because, and I still don't understand why they really didn't double team him as much or triple team because he was getting off that football. And every time you see Cam Newton go down or throw the football quick, Von Miller was somewhere in the vicinity. And he became one of my favorite pass rushes of all time that I've ever seen, especially on the edge after that game, because he just showed you how phenomenal he can be. But a side note, that Connie Ely performance was very great too from Carolina during that Super Bowl, which I don't know what happened after that because I thought his star would extend after that. Because if Carolina finds a way to win that game, Coney Ely is going to be the MVP of that game because of the stats. He had the multiple sacks. He had an interception. I believe he had a fumble recovery. That game was phenomenal for him, but for some reason, he became, um, the guy who won the MVP for the Seahawks that year, that linebacker, Malcolm Smith. He became the Malcolm Smith of the NFL because he had a great Super Bowl performance and we really didn't hear from him again, which is unfortunate because that performance was great, but he got sidelined because of the Broncos win, for one, and then two, Von Miller's performance. So, but if you're talking about the greatest rushing linebackers of all time, of course, in title, you have to put Von Miller in that discussion. Then next you have a Terrell Suggs who wasn't the fastest, but he was definitely one of the most productive Russian linebackers of all time because he was listed in linebacker, but most of the time, like I said, he was at defensive end. He didn't do a lot of pass coverage because like I said, he wasn't the fastest or the quickest. But when it comes to these offensive linemen, he could be very slick and he could be very deceiving as far as speed goes because he can jump off the football very fast. Now his side to side motions and stuff like that, pause was not as quick as others, but he was able to attack the quarterback in a way that most couldn't have, especially playing in those great games against Ben Roethlisberger and how big of a quarterback he was. and being able to disrupt what they were able to do. He was just phenomenal in that regards. And he was a big part of the championship that they won against the 49ers, even though it didn't show on the stat sheet. But what he did that year and throughout his tenure with the Ravens, he was definitely one of those forces to be reckoned with. And he still currently holds the season sack record in college football, which is a phenomenal 24 sacks when he was at Arizona State, and that record hasn't been touched yet in over 20 plus years. So, what Terrell Suggs has been able to do throughout not only just through the NFL but his college career, all of that have to be considered as well because he's always shown this ability. He might not have the 40 time or the shuttle times or any of these ancillary things that they look for. But if you look at his film, he was grade A, and he's definitely in one of those best pass rushing linebackers of all time. And then next, of course, Lawrence Taylor, who's most considered the greatest defensive player of all time, and if not the greatest player of all time. Um, Most people put him in the top 5 greatest players of all time just because he was a defensive player, and you can only affect so much. But in an era where they primarily ran the football, he was one of the greatest to attack the quarterback and stop the run. He was just a freak of nature on the field. He was able to do things that we've never seen and haven't seen to this day for a defensive player to do. To win the defensive rookie of the year and to win a league MVP defensive player of the year still hasn't been done to this day and probably never will be done again because it's just too difficult to do. To learn the speed of the NFL usually takes a couple of years, at least to get to that elite level. But he was at that level coming into the league, especially in those Giants defenses with the scheme that they ran in that 3-4, with all those great linebackers, the Harry Carsons and all those guys that they had. They had Belichick as a defensive coordinator, and you had Parcells there. So he had a lot of great toolage above him. But for him to be able to be such a phenomenon it's just amazing. And people know how tough Bill Belichick and Parcells are as coaches. And I remember Bill Belichick saying that LT was the only player that could sleep through his meetings because he was just that great. He didn't really need the film preparation. He just went to go get the quarterback. He didn't need to. He was pretty much above approach at that point because of just his skill set. And he was one of the most feared players of all time. Because when you think about those greatest defensive players of all time, you think of a Deion Sanders, you think of the Ed Reeds, you think about the Darrelle Revises, you even think about the defense that the Seahawks had, or you think about the Urlachers. But none of these guys were feared like Lawrence Taylor was. And Lawrence Taylor, was responsible for making 2 positions famous: the pass rusher and then the offensive tackle. Now, if you don't have one of those, it's going to be difficult for you to win the Super Bowl or do anything. Look at even more recent, what Patrick Mahomes is going through. He hasn't had the strongest tackle play, but these opposing teams have had strong pass rushers. So he's not been able to be as effective. So you can have a generational talent in a quarterback, but if you can't protect them, you're not going anywhere. You're actually going to set your quarterback up for failure, which Kansas City has seen, Aaron Rodgers has seen throughout his career, even Jared Goff. All of these quarterbacks have seen this. If you see a quarterback struggle, it's going to be tied to 2 things: that defensive end or a defensive tackle possibly, but mostly a defensive end and then an offensive tackle. It'll tell you the story of the season. That's all you need to know pretty much. And LT made that famous. So he have to definitely be in that conversation. And lastly, Derek Thomas, which is an all-time Chief great and all-time NFL great. Uh, a guy that put up crazy numbers. And like I said, in an era that wasn't a passing era, there were a few teams that really focused on passing, and that was like the Dolphins because they were in a warm environment and they just had a great quarterback with a strong arm. So they were able to get away with that. But most players, especially in the conference that they were in back then, I think the Seahawks were in a conference, they had running backs like Ricky Waters and stuff he had to deal with. So they really didn't have strong passing games or a lot of opportunities to rush the quarterback. But Derek Thomas was just more than a pass rusher. He could stop the run as well. how explosive he was off the football. You always hear me say that when I talk about defensive linemen, how fast you can get off the football, how physical you are, what are your skill set, the spin moves you have, all of those things taken into account. And Derek Thomas was definitely one of the most physical, especially coming out of Alabama in college. They're always known for defense. So he had great tutelage coming up. He had probably great guidance and all those things, but defense is always about want to. Not just about if you can be the strongest or be the most physical, but do you have the energy to go through the double teams and triple teams and chip blocks from the tight ends and things like that? Derek Thomas had a great motor and probably had one of the best motors next to LT that you'll ever see, because a lot of his stuff was older, like in the 90s. So it kind of gets brushed on the rug today because a lot of kids don't look at highlights and look at film, which you have the easeability or ease to do so with a YouTube today and other internet options that they have and stuff like that. So I always recommend that you watch a Derek Thomas or a Lawrence Taylor and what they were able to do out their careers through their highlights, because it was just phenomenal. It looks like they were playing with kids out there, how physical they were and how easy they got to the quarterback and got in the backfield. So that's my Mount Rushmore of those linebackers that are listed linebackers, but are true in essence pass rushers. So until next time, I'll see you next time.